So, salam nacho, tanastaling, betamamasaganalo. These are words that have great meaning from where I'm coming from. They mean things like this: greetings to you and blessings to all of you that are here. Thank you very much for being here. It's been a great break from Ethiopia to come back and spend a little bit of time on a visit here in North Carolina, back in our home roots. My family and I, my wife and 3 sons, moved to Eastern Africa, to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, 4.5 years ago. Here's why. Back in 2005, here in this town, we had some friends who made a very simple and encouraging invitation. They said, you know, come to Uganda, visit us, take a little bit of time away from the pace of your work, and invest and see what might happen. They said it didn't require for us to come with a team. We didn't have to do this work with a project in mind. Simply come and make an investment. I had a sabbatical coming up from the Center for Creative Leadership, and I took that time to go to Uganda, with permission, of course, from family and support along the way. And when I got there, I discovered I had something that I didn't really know about until I got there. It's called Mzungu fears. Mzungu fears are foreigner fears, so I don't know if you know what the top foreigner fears are. Foreigner fears look like this, as an example. The mosquito. That little bitty bug, 1 in 70, could give you malaria. And so we do all kinds of things to prepare ourselves for that trip. All kinds of drugs that start to pump and flow before we ever land in that foreign place like India or Africa or Latin America. Another concern that many of us have, I don't know if you're like this, but you know, we worry about security. At the time in 2005 when I went to Uganda, in the north of Uganda, there was something called the Lord's Resistance Army, the LRA. And led by Joseph Kony, I had this concern that I might bump in to some folks somehow related to that security issue, even though I was going to southern Uganda. Another concern, you know, you find yourself in a small hut at the edge of a compound, and the very first night, you start to hear noises that you've never heard before. There's the wildlife out there that you didn't know existed, and screeches that sound like women. They actually are birds. All kinds of things that start to make you attentive to the fact that you're in someplace different. The other thing that caught my attention that very first night in Uganda was the fact that at 7 p.m. the lights went out. It's called load shedding. Uganda was selling its power to its neighbors, and I was walking around with my little headlamp on. It's the only thing I could use to see. So I'm getting ready to go to bed. And right when I think that I'm going to sort of call it a day and tuck in for the night, I hear this knock on the door. And I will tell you, my heart was pounding every time I heard that knock. So I go to the door and I crack it open just a little bit. And sure enough, with my headlamp, I see this man who's about 6.5 feet tall, dressed in all camouflage, and I thought, oh my goodness, they found me. So he's motioning to something in the room. Now I came with my guitar, and he's motioning to the guitar case, and I think, okay, he's security here at the orphanage. He's wanting to make certain that I didn't bring something to this orphanage that I shouldn't, like an AK-47. So I bring it out on the front porch, and I open the guitar case very slowly, and I show him, it's just a guitar, no worries. And he motions to this guitar. He asks me if he could hold it. And so he sits down on the front porch in the dark, in this little hut where I'm staying, outside of Jinja, Uganda, and he begins to play the most amazing music. All up and down the fretboard, he was like the Santana of Uganda. I am just spellbound. I'm grabbing my little iPhone to try and catch whatever I can in the dark in terms of video. It was amazing stuff. About 10 minutes, playing, singing, humming. Charles Silas Owat. So at the close of this 10 minutes, I go over to Charles, and I ask for my guitar back, I take it from him, and my headlamp catches something that I wasn't expecting to see. On his cheeks, this man has tears streaming down his face. And I have to get to know Charles better. I'm asking the question, what is it that Charles has experienced in his life that was so emotional that would bring him to tears about this? Over the coming weeks, I got to know him very well. He explained to me that 30 years before, he had learned to play guitar, but he never had access to that beautiful tool. Well, I'll tell you something. When I came to the end of my time in Uganda, I couldn't take that guitar back with me. I had to leave it with him. It was one that my mom had given me. It had sentimental value. But I said, Charles, you need to keep this. And I gifted him this guitar, and I said, I only ask one thing. If you'll do me a favor, look around. You're here at an orphanage. You're a security guard. Would you teach a few of these kids to play music like someone taught you? Now, I came back to Greensboro, and the Center for Creative Leadership blew me away with an opportunity to go back with a research team a year later. And I sort of had forgotten about the guitar. I get there, they know I'm coming, kids are meeting me at the gate, they're dancing and they're singing, welcoming me. They take me up to this multi-purpose space, sort of like this. And one young person after another takes the stage, holding my guitar, playing better than I do, because they've got about 6 hours a day to practice. Charles had paid it forward. I want to show you a picture of someone who's dear to my heart. This is Paul Casada. This picture was just taken a month ago. He was married, and you'll notice the wedding cake. It's a guitar. Paul Casada owns his own guitar shop in Jinja. He's a singer-songwriter. He's studying music and writing his own words. He's an amazing musician. It's transformed his life. Did I have something to do with that? I think very little. Charles took that tool, was put into the right hands, and he paid it forward. That was a huge lesson for me. It was an inspiration. I don't have so many guitars, though I've taken a few back over the years. But what I had access to as a tool was leadership development. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. The idea of putting leadership development as a tool into the right hands. Particularly ours here today and those beyond the walls. So what I've learned from the travels that we've been a part of, the growing work that we have in Eastern Africa, is that leaders of the future need to be prepared to be boundary spanners. Boundaries are the things that get in the way. They trip us up. There are all kinds of dividers. We talked today about the fact that it's a flat world. And in that flat world, there's all kinds of amazing opportunities. But if we don't have boundary spanners, we can't get beyond the problems, the things that are in the way. We need people who build bridges. So today we've heard about people who, as an example, found their inspiration on the shores of places like India. We've heard of young people building virtual teams with people that they may never meet in person, but across the digital divide. Boundary spanning is about tackling the geographic divide, getting ourselves, whether it's virtually or on an airplane, and tackling this sense of geography that sends the message that it gets in the way. Geography, demographics, young and old, male and female, religious differences. How do we as individuals find the common ground connection and build the bridge to the people that are out there in that bigger world, that flat world that is so connected today? The last boundary that I want to mention to you, just so that you have these in mind, not only demographics and geography, but hierarchy. I think we're used to a world where there's someone in charge, and we're used to thinking about ourselves in some sort of structure underneath another person. Maybe it's someone we feel like we need to ask permission of. Maybe it's someone that we feel like we need to be influenced by rather than influencing them. In addition to boundary spanning, I want to give you this notion that networks and relationships really, really do matter. We've heard some of these themes today, so it's not a new concept or an idea. But here's the thing that I want you to think about. In the past, institutions, organizations, companies provided us with the backbone of network. You came to work for an organization and you were sort of fit into an existing network. But as we go forward into the future, you represent the network that the organization needs. The many are able to have so many more connections. And it's the connectors, it's the bridge builders in those networks that do amazing good. They bring the right people to the table. They say, you know what, you need to meet so-and-so. Let me make that introduction for you. They're connecting the dots. And in innovation and leadership, we say, the dots connect backwards. One of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of organizations still have many closed networks. In other words, the network is about a community of practice, something in common, a little on the homogeneous side. In the future, we need open networks. We need to actually know who you know that's not related or tied directly to the work of the organization or the institution. We actually need people who play an outsider's role to give us new ideas to bring new inspiration, to see things from a different angle and a new angle. One of the things that I'm really passionate about is democratizing leader development. Our paradigm, when you think back, the way that we grew up in many ways, was to think of pyramids. They could be economic pyramids, they could be organizational pyramids, or societal pyramids. But we found ourselves looking at that and thinking of leadership, and particularly the notion of leadership development, as something for the elite. Those few leaders at the top of the system. What we see in the bigger world, a growing, flat world, is that it's no longer about the few, but it's about the leadership of the many. That's going to be the change. You've read about Arab Spring, you know many great examples. But the whole concept is this, that if we're going to really democratize leader, or those that we look to lead, as we just heard in the last speech, we really need to democratize leadership development to prepare people. These young women on this slide are from the Social Innovation Mentors Group. That's the ICE Hub in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Innovation, collaboration, entrepreneurship. I often get asked, where would you spend your money? Where would you invest your time? And I would say to you that earlier is better. If we can actually start young with the investment of leadership development, we're going to change the world. We're going to make it a different place, and it is possible. Our president at the Center for Creative Leadership, his name is John Ryan, and he talks about leadership like a muscle. And he says, you know, the earlier you begin to flex that muscle, the readier you are for the challenges that you're going to face, the more prepared, the better stamina you have to lead when it matters. And so that's where I think the investment needs to be made. Democratizing leader development, stretching ourselves to invest in hidden leaders, not necessarily the ones in the spotlight, not necessarily the top 2% at the top of the pyramid. I want to tell you one last story, and that's about Chad. So he's one of those young leaders that we've been investing in. Back in Uganda on my first day, Chad came up to me and he tugged on my sleeve and he said, Steadman, do you know my sponsor? And I said, well, you know, it would depend on where your sponsor's from. I was thinking maybe Europe, maybe the US. He said, oh, he's from America. I said, well, it's a big place, Chad. Do you know what state he might be from? I'm thinking maybe Texas or Alabama, where past directors had been from. And he said, oh, he's from the United States. And I said, you know, Chad, I tell you what, if I ever meet someone in the United States who's supporting and sponsoring a young child named Chad in Uganda, I'm going to come back and let you know about that. Now, I bonded with this boy over the course of my time at Good Shepherd's Fold Orphanage in Uganda. And on the last day, the director said, you know what, you really should look up and see who Chad's sponsor is. Maybe you could add some support or help along the way. Let's just go to the database. We went to this small office, little green screen, and he pulls up in the database about Chad. And he said, oh, this is interesting. You're from North Carolina. And he said, this sponsor's from North Carolina. And I lean in. And he said, you know, you're from Greensboro. This sponsor's from Greensboro. And now I'm like really leaning. And there on that little green screen, I saw Stephen Jobs, an architect at the Center for Creative Leadership I've used multiple times. I knew this man. I knew the sponsor for Chad. Now I told Chad, I said, don't get excited yet, but I think I may have a story here. I went back to the United States. I took Stephen out for lunch. He thought maybe I had another project in mind, something we might need to discuss in terms of business. We sat down, and I said, have you ever sponsored a kid over in Africa? He said, yeah, you know, I filled out one of those forms, $29.99 a month. I do all kinds of things. He sends me Christmas greetings. And I put pictures down, and I slid them over in front of him, and I said, you're never going to believe it, but I met the child that you sponsored. I got to know Chad, the kid that you've been investing in. After that discussion, a couple other dots got connected. Stephen Jobs went over to Uganda. He ended up helping build schools, build housing on that same place that I had gone to visit. This is the thing that I want you to be thinking about right now. When we see a TED video, the first thing that we see is a little droplet of water and ripples going out from that droplet. The next time you see a TED video, I want you to think of the ripple effect and opportunity that you have to take amazing ideas out of the room and out into the bigger world around us. I want you to be thinking about the kinds of things that are written on that wonderful wall out there in the lobby that ask the question, what are you going to do different because you came here today? The opportunity is there for you to democratize leader development, to find hidden leaders and to wake them up to their potential. The opportunity is there for you to span boundaries, virtually or hopping on an airplane and coming to visit a place like Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The invitation is real. You don't have to come with a project. You don't necessarily need to have something in mind that you're going to do. Just come and invest. Today, as we think about the close of this time that we have together, I want to challenge you to take a step, to let the dots connect backwards. When I look around and I think about the potential in terms of the network in this room, it's phenomenal. So take a step, take an action, invest in a leader that you know, get yourself invested in that bigger world. Let's do that together. And remember, the future begins now.